Welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show, where we explore the fascinating world of real estate investing with your host, Patrick Switek. Patrick is a dynamic young entrepreneur and an accomplished real estate investor who's passionate about helping others achieve financial freedom. Each week, we sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals in the real estate industry and delve into their personal journeys, lessons learned, and secrets to their success. Let's dive into this week's episode.
Katie, welcome to Patrick Real Estate Show. I am
Thank
so
you.
excited to bring you on because you are truly an expert in all things hospitality. Katie's background involves working for top luxury hotels like the Ritz Carlton and W hotels. She has an extensive background in the luxury hospitality industry, and I think she's going to give incredible just knowledge and experience from that world, right? That's a very mature world, taking that and bringing it into the short-term rental world where she has two of her own that she owns and manages, and takes that same high 5-star experience back into the short-term rental space. And I definitely am super excited to see differences across the board for the two, but also how we can learn from each other to really make the best luxury hospitality experience for our guests. But without further ado, Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction that was. I'm such a huge fan of the show. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, of course. And I can't get started without knowing about your background. So why don't you tell everybody who you are and how you got here?
Sure. So I am a fairly new short-term rental owner and host. I have two properties, as you mentioned, since last year. I purchased my first kind of proof of concept and then saw how well it was doing and completely am bitten by the bug now. And that's how I found your show and just completely opened this whole world of short-term rentals to me. But as you mentioned, I come from a really deep background of hospitality. I led global PR and communications for some of the world's best hotel brands. So as you mentioned at the top, that's brands like Ritz Carlton Reserve, W Hotels, St. Regis, Bulgari, Edition, Le Méridien, JW Marriott, probably missing a few in there as well. And I worked in both New York, where I'm from, and in London. So gave me a bit of a global perspective there as well. And I'm really passionate about sharing the lessons that I've learned from the hotel world with fellow short-term rental hosts and owners. I think there's a lot that we can learn from them. I think there's a lot that we also inherently do better. So how can we play that up as our almost short-term rental superpowers? And I'm so passionate about it actually that I have launched a podcast called Sweet Success. That's sweet like hotel suite. It's part of the hospitality.fm network, which has a lot of our mutual friend shows like Natalie Palmer's No Vacancy and Cece St. John's STR Sisterhood. And of course, the amazing Will Slickers, who founded the network and runs Slick Talk and Good Morning Hospitality. So it's been a ton of fun to get to interview hotel execs and leaders in hospitality and just like innovators in the industry and really spur that creativity and think about how we can take those lessons, those things that they do just so intrinsically and inherently, and then apply that to our wonderful world of STRs.
Awesome. So what really is the big difference between hotels and short-term rentals that you've experienced coming into the short-term rental world? Like, what are the first things you've realized are the big differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a big question, right? There are a lot of differences and there are a lot of similarities. I would say the kind of first aha moment I had was that not everyone approaches it the way that I do, which is coming from that hotel and hospitality lens. I think a lot of people get into the short-term rental space first and foremost as real estate investors. And I completely understand that. There are obviously a lot of reasons why it's a great strategy, a lot of great tax advantages, etc. A lot of reasons why we love this world. But I believe that the moment that we open our doors to our first guests, we shift from real estate investor into host. We shift into hospitality, right? And therefore, someone said this to me the other day, you can't save a penny to make a dollar. And I thought that is such a beautiful way of explaining what I'm trying to say, which is we need to think about how we're putting the guests first. And it's not always in things that cost money. It's how we talk to them, communicate with them, handhold them, make them feel special and seen. But how do we take those lessons in hospitality and bring that through to our guests, which by the way, is then going to help our bottom lines get even chunkier at the end.
I feel like when you were working with a company like, let's say a brand like the Ritz Carlton, you have to convince the executives that whatever you're doing from a hospitality perspective is actually going to help their bottom line as well.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because you have to spend money sometimes to do that. Not
Yes.
always, but sometimes. What are those ways that you saw maybe in the hotel world that you had to spend money to be able to make that guest experience better? And in turn, how did that help the bottom line for
Yeah.
those
That's a
hotels?
wonderful question and something I have a lot of familiarity with because, as I mentioned, I worked in PR, public relations. And so, depending upon the owner or the executive that you're working on, I find that people tend to fall into one of two camps. Either they believe in the power of PR or they don't. And for those
Mhm.
that don't, they can see it as an expense, right? As a hit against the bottom line. And I'll use a really small example. If we're saying, hey, we want a journalist to write about your property, oftentimes in the hotel world, we would cover their flight or at the very least comp their hotel room. So they're in the market already. I'm going to an owner and saying, hey, I have this incredible journalist from Travel and Leisure or from Afar or New York Times or whomever who's really interested in the property. It's editorial. So at the end of the day, this is earned coverage. We're not controlling it. It's not guaranteed. We also are not guaranteeing what they're going to write. It is genuinely their opinion. And that's what makes, I think, editorial coverage so powerful. So to get an owner or an executive to say, yeah, I'm going to give up revenue for the night for one room, it takes a lot of convincing, like you said. And I think the industry has done a lot in terms of measurement and monitoring, which is probably a bit too in the weeds for what our purposes are. You can actually look at Google referrers and see who's coming to your direct booking website, and actually seeing if they came from a piece of press coverage that you got. But I do also think that there's just a halo effect. And something that actually I spoke with Natalie Palmer, a mutual friend of ours, about was the almost like gravitas that being covered in an outlet like that gives to you. So if we look at it for our perspective as short-term rental owners, if our home, if our property is covered in Business Insider or Departures magazine or something like that, and you're able to put on your social media or on your direct booking website as seen in, that's
Yes.
almost giving you a bit more legitimacy right there. And even though I don't really think the industry in general has had the issue of people arriving and a place isn't there, or maybe you still have a bit of it looked different in the pictures than it did in person. Almost when you have a third party source talking about you, it almost says this is real, this is as good as it looks in pictures, it legitimizes it for you.
Oh, absolutely. And I deal with properties in Joshua Tree that are super luxury.
Mm.
So I just put up a new listing yesterday, and the new listing, I in the title, it's the name of the house, panorama house, and dash, and it says or two whatever whatever comma or whatever,
Yep.
and it says featured in dwell, because that is a big deal, and I think people are going to appreciate something that is architecturally significant enough to be actually to featured in dwell, and that's a
Sure.
huge an award in that retrospect. I do that especially when we get featured in Forbes or featured
Mhm.
in whatever. I like putting in the title because it builds credibility for the people that are finding it. And I have a few properties that do that, and it works extremely well
To be honest,
in
I didn't
getting
even
people
think
to want to
about
go
that. You're
through.
so right in the listing
Mhm.
title. Of course, we can showcase things better on our direct booking websites and whatnot. And actually, I have a website that people can go to learn more about the property and has
Mhm.
more of like editorial content on it, but I'm not doing direct booking yet. But you're right. Even on our OTAs, we can be highlighting that. Or if it was a spread in Dwell print magazine, taking a photo of that and adding that to your carousel as well. What a great idea.
Absolutely. And I think that, and doing the snippet of the editorial is good. Like, I know some people that do that. I personally don't do that because I think that pictures do a really good job of describing amenities.
Yeah.
Pictures do a really good job of showcasing like pool, hot tub. Usually people put like amenities in the title, which
Yep.
is still good. But I think pictures do the justice, right? So when you pop up on the screen, especially on Airbnb, and you get those 5 pictures,
Yep.
you have the opportunity to sell them, and having the pool, the hot tub, the view, like all showcased there, like it speaks a million words versus a screenshot of an editorial. You're trying to find what it is, like
Yes.
when you can clearly just write it in the title and it's just clear as day and it does the job. So
You're touching on another kind of learning from the hotel world
mhm.
too. And it's the age old saying of a picture is worth $1 million or words or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
I'm already botching it, but
Mhm.
you know what I'm trying to say. And I feel like the amount of hosts who are like my iPhone takes great photos, or like my sister can take them for me, or what have you. And maybe you have a very talented photographer sister, great. But
Yeah.
you're right. If these photos don't sing immediately, there are so many other properties out there. And we all know we're constantly bombarded by messages or clips or social media or notifications or whatever it may be. Like, how do we stop that scroll, as a lot of people say, and making sure our first photo, but then, like you said, especially those first five, are showing different parts of our property and really highlighting it and making it look as absolutely best as it can be.
Oh my God, you're nailing it on the dot. This is why I love talking to people from hospitality background. Look at you. The way that I look at, because once again, luxury properties. So I need to sell the experience. I need to sell and invoke that emotion because
Yeah.
in this business, people buy not when they go to the property, people buy when they see the marketing and everything online. Like they make their purchases decision there.
Yeah.
And so that's how the difference is. And a lot of people do Zillow photos. And I'm like, no, it's not. You're not trying to convince somebody to buy a house. You need to find an influencer that can come and be on the guitar. There's a fire pit with a beautiful view and in the boulders. Like that's going to invoke an emotion. That's
Yeah.
going to make people feel, I want to do that. I want to experience that. Or kids playing in the pool, like with the parents, like just really embody. And I see hotels doing this too, where they embody like a kid going down a slide with the adult. Like you can envision like, oh my God, connection with my kid. That's
Right.
exactly what I want to do when I want to go to this hotel is I want to
Yeah.
connect with my kid. Speaking to that, the obviously demographic that you're looking to attract in that respect as well.
Couldn't agree more. I think
Yeah.
it's interesting too, because I was in meetings when we started that shift in the hotel space from, as you said, almost like real estate like photos to more lifestyle. I can't even tell you the amount of debates over we cannot show a messy bed. Like you had
Mm.
like staunch executives, no, like we have to, the bed must be pristinely, perfectly made. And I understand that thinking. I completely do. But at the same time, the kind of influencer having breakfast in bed or it's messy with a suitcase on it or whatever, it brings it to life in a way. And I think a lot of short-term rental owners might think that's great for W. Of course, they could afford these influencers and have these relationships, but I tell you, it's really possible for all of us as well, especially if you have a great property like you do. But even if it's not in the luxury space, if you just have something that's quite special, the amount of just barter partnerships you could do, this is where I really like social media because I have a love-hate relationship with social media, as probably most people do. But the amount of people that I have met just in the general vicinity of my properties or fellow owners, etc. And people who are influencers and maybe they don't have big followings. Maybe they have 1,000, maybe they have even less people following them. But if you look at them, you're like, wow, they take beautiful photos and the way they bring spaces alive really feels like right for your quote unquote brand. Because I really do think each property is in a way its own brand. Reach out to them and say, would you want to come for 2 nights for free? Usually I pay for the cleaning fee for them as well. So there is a small expense to my bottom line. But in return, you're going to give me X amount of still photos and potentially drone photos or videos or whatever it is that they specialize in. And I think that's something that hotels know and have done for a really long time, which is know your value, know what you're bringing to the table. You're going to have some influencers say they need to be paid for it. And if you're in a position to do and you feel like the content is meeting your content needs, great. But you're also going to have a lot that will say, yeah, I'm building my portfolio. So I need cool spaces to shoot and you need cool content. So here we go. Win for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. We do the same. We do exactly that. We have a website because we've done this so many times with so many launches at over 100 properties now.
Wow.
So we have a website that's like literally how to do content and what deliverables we're seeking out. Hey, don't look at the camera.
Right.
Don't break any of the rules on things of that nature.
Right.
But anyways, yeah, I think that's really cool learning. I want to switch gears to kind of other differences that you maybe see or similarities between the hotel industry and short-term rentals.
Similarities or differences? Which would you prefer?
Differences,
Differences.
yeah, or both, yeah.
I'll start with similarities. One thing, when I was working on the brand Le Méridien, we did some proprietary research, and the brand found that within the first 10 minutes of a guest's arrival, that really sets the tone for their entire stay. So I think about that a lot with my properties. To me, that comes down to, did you give good enough directions, or did they have to drive past the house a few times before they actually found it? When they arrived, if they got there at night, did a light come on? Did it stay on long enough for them to get the luggage or the baby out of the car? Did they have to dig around for a lockbox and find a physical key? Or did you give them like a digital code that's personalized to them and personalized to their hours? And then most important of all is cleanliness. I think when you first walk in, if immediately you see something that's not right, you now have your critical eye on. You're now looking around at every little corner. You're going to find everything, right? And that's not the state of mind that we want our guests to be in when they first arrive. We want them to be like, look around and go, wow, this is beautiful. And then the relaxation sets in, right? And now we're all set up for success.
I love that. First impressions, everything. What was the statistic you just said?
And the first 10 minutes dictates their entire experience. Yep.
First 10 minutes.
Yep.
Wow.
Their opinion.
That's incredible. And so true. Like one of the number one things that we always tell our owners is to make sure that the lockbox and or the check-in instructions is like very clear.
Yeah.
If they mess up, even if it's a user error and they can't get into the house, you're going to get dinged for that because they're just waiting there. They're tired. They're exhausted. Like it's the worst first impressions you can give. So we try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
For that kind of thing. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And we've all been there. We've been on the other side. Recently I just stayed at a place and I didn't even get a message before check-in. Usually I message all of my guests 2 days before check-in with kind of everything that they need. Now, Airbnb makes it easy. I could find all that information. I was able to find all the information, but the fact that the guest didn't message me, the host didn't message me, and I had to go rooting around on the app for like, where is the check-in time? And then the other thing was on Airbnb, it said check-in time was 3. And so I had messaged and said, we'll be in the area. So if it happens to be available earlier than 3, let us know. Otherwise we'll be there at 3. And the host wrote me back and said, oh no, check-in's at 4. And I'm like, no, it's not on your Airbnb page. And then when we were there, now this is my arrival experience, right? So now I have a critical eye on. There's a laminated paper that they had on the table, which was rules from the property management company. And that said that checkout was 11. But on Airbnb, it said that checkout was 10. And so I messaged them when I checked out, just so you know, like you have differing information here. And like that, it's so minor and it doesn't matter. We were gone well before 10 anyway. But it's just all adding to that experience and either adding friction and frustration or just making them be like, oh, that was just such a great stay.
Do you think that people lose trust when something like that happens?
I think that's such a beautiful way to put it. Absolutely. I actually just had a really bad experience yesterday with one of my guests. He checked out. Everything was great. I had seen on the exterior security camera that they brought a dog, which they didn't tell me, which happens all the time. I think people see that a house is pet friendly and either think, oh, maybe I'll bring them, maybe I won't bring them, or maybe it's like a last minute decision and they forget to let me know. Totally fine. I always send the pet free retroactively and I explain in that this is a fee that's passed directly to my cleaner so that they don't feel like I'm just like money grubbing here, even though we should be able to set fees as we see fit, but that's a different topic. And he completely freaked out at me. The nastiness in these messages. First of all, I think he forgot there's a human on the other side of it, but just, this is ridiculous. It doesn't say anything about this. It's very clear. If you would have put it in your booking, you would have been charged the fee. So now this is all with Airbnb arbitration. So anytime like these things happen, first of all, I try to tell myself, don't take it personally. And that's a really hard thing to do for people like us who are so invested. And I want my guests to have the best time ever and want to come back again. The second thing that I think about too, in terms of don't take it personally, is also like, how can I learn from this and where maybe did I go wrong? And typically when I have my first message after someone books, I either confirm that they're bringing a baby or a dog based on what their booking details tell me, or I just say, and to confirm you're not bringing a dog with you. That time they were bringing an infant and they said no dog. And instead of saying, and you're not bringing a dog, right? I focused on the infant because for me, both things, infant and dog, I like to provide a bit more for them. So for an infant, I like to do a pack and play with a plush mattress and a sheet, a high chair, and a baby gate. I have a 2-year-old, so I know what it's like to travel and with a little one and not want to bring those things with you. And then for a dog, I like to put out doggy bowls and a dog towel and a little treat for them. And just, again, going above and beyond to make them feel welcome as well. And I didn't actually say to them, and you're not bringing a dog, right? So that was a good lesson for me to learn. So I think it's don't take it personally, but then also reflect on how we can improve going forward. Because you're right, to be fair, that guest felt that the trust was gone, that he thought he was getting one thing. And even though he had already rated his stay 5 stars, now all of a sudden he felt like he was being hit with a fee that he didn't know about, even though it's very clearly disclosed. And I can understand from his perspective, that might be frustrating.
Yeah, that is, wow, that's a very mature response. It reminds me of 2 books. One, Extreme Ownership, where you
True.
take ownership over everything that happens, even though there's a part of it that wasn't your fault.
Yep.
And then also book number 2, have you ever heard of Complaint is a Gift?
No.
Very incredible book. It basically, the title says you should always look at guests complaining or something of that nature happening as a gift, because it is an opportunity for you to improve.
Yes.
It is feedback. In the design world, when there's a user error, when somebody makes a mistake, it's usually on the design.
Yes.
And that means you got to figure out a more friendly design that allows that functionality of that item to be better. So same for a system or a process or the way you conduct business. There might be a way to make that a little bit better for somebody.
I love that. I'm going to read that. Definitely. I think there's 2 things in there. Number one is like also how we approach the language around it. Like, I could have just been like, you didn't tell me that a dog was coming. And if you would look with your eyes, you'd see it on my listing. But instead it said, oh, I understand this must be frustrating with you. Let me explain to you actually what the cleaning company is doing to go above and beyond. Because he was like, that's BS. They're not doing anything more. And I'm like, they actually are. And we have a child with asthma in the family, so why it needs to be undertaken. And you didn't tell me the dog was coming, and all these things, really very like polite and approachable, because I also like to remember, like, we don't know what's going on in other people's lives, and there's other motivators that are making him respond that way. He's also the one who told me he was bringing his like 2-month-old child. So he's probably tired, and I don't appreciate being yelled at, but still. And then secondly, like you said about feedback, oh my gosh, I always think if someone says something to you once, listen and understand it. If someone says something to you twice, like, you need to change it. So for our Lake George property, I've had feedback twice now that one bed is extremely uncomfortable. Okay, that's it. I'm changing that mattress. It was an older mattress anyway. So I shouldn't get it a 3rd time. Otherwise, I'm not paying attention to it. Or if people are constantly asking for the same thing, then I need to make sure I'm communicating that to them in multiple different touch points, because you and I know people don't really read everything, right? So if they didn't read the listing, they may not read the welcome guide. They may not read the welcome message. They may not see any collateral I've left for them in the house. So how do I make sure I've got that message through in multiple places so that they don't have to be like, wait, where is this?
Yeah, that it's just those little touches, those little details. Yeah, absolutely. Now, curious, as we're going into this deeper, Katie, I think one thing that I'm sure a lot of people want to know is the big question. What can the short-term rental industry learn from the big dogs?
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I have clients that come to me and tell me, Patrick, I want that Ritz Carlton experience for my guests. I want that. It's the branding. The Ritz Carlton has some of the best NPS scores, which is called the Net Promoter Score, which is a way to judge based on a series of tests. How likely are you to recommend the place to a friend? A lot of times, if you land at the 10, 1 out of 10, closer to 10 is better.
Right.
And that score tells you like how good your hospitality is. Or customer service. And it seems like the Ritz Carlton ranks really high time and time again. Yeah. And I'm curious, can short-term rental operators achieve that greatness? Is that not possible because of the nuances of the industry? I want to hear your thoughts.
I think there's so much that we can learn from the hotel industry. There are some things that the hotel industry can learn from us, and we can touch on those later. We started with one already, the art of arrival. How do we think about the arrival experience for our guests? You've mentioned Ritz Carlton, and I think that's a great brand to bring up. So something some people don't know is they actually have a credo, which is like a little poem thing that they recite every day that is goes back to the level of service that they're striving to give to their guests every day. And that's everyone from the housekeeper to the front desk person. It doesn't matter. So they've printed out and have like little laminated credo cards, every single associate, even corporate associates, we had them as well. And as many people may be aware, in most hotels, before a shift begins, you have something called a lineup meeting. And so you have management and everyone who's working that shift come together, review anything that's happening that day. They'll talk about VIPs checking in or who's checking out, or just what people need to be mindful of, right? And for Ritz Carlton, at the end of that meeting, they will read through that credo card. So on a daily basis, they're like reminding themselves what they're here for. You referenced two books earlier. I know you're a big reader, but it reminds me of Start With Why. I think that's Simon Sinek. If you have a reason of what you're doing, you're more likely to actually achieve it. So I think that's a good thing for us to think about in terms of our teams. And many owners might say, we don't have a team, it's just me. But we do. We have cleaners, we have landscapers, we have handymen. Like, how are we making sure that we're supporting them? Actually, something I just did for the first time this year was sent the cleaners for both of my properties a little like end of busy season bonus. And I wrote them a handwritten card and just said, our houses literally would not be successful if it wasn't for you. I think cleaners are like the most valuable part of this entire cog. And it's what people struggle with the most, right? Like finding a good team. And especially for a lot of us who are remote, they're your eyes and ears in the market. So how can I make sure that on a day that maybe they have two same days, they're going to go to mine because they're like, oh, Katie really appreciates me and sends me a bonus once a year, or whatever it may be. So I think those are some little things. The other thing, there's so many learnings I would say, but another one that I would say is like remembering that we're in the business of experiences over real estate, like I touched on earlier. And I think the way we can illustrate this from the hotel perspective is, I think people who aren't in the industry look at hotels and think, oh, Marriott International, gosh, they own 8,000 hotels around the world. But actually, they own some of them, they manage some of them, and they franchise some of them. So there's a lot of similarities within the STR world in terms of if we think of like rental arbitrage or co-hosting, you're not actually owning those assets, but you're managing them or you're making your money off of them. So if we look at Marriott International, which is the biggest hotel company in the world, they only own 0.6% of their real estate, and Hilton only owns 0.7%. So these are like massive companies. The rest of their properties are either managed or franchised. So really what that's telling you is they make their money from experiences. They don't make their money from physical real estate assets there. So when we think about that in terms of our own properties, two examples that really come to the surface for me are like being pet friendly or not, and allowing things like bachelorette parties. If we think of pet friendly, the amount of people who own animals, particularly like after the pandemic, where I think everybody was like, I need a puppy, it's massive, right? And if I even just look at my properties, my first summer season for the Lake George property, more than 50% of my guests booked with either a dog coming with them or with the option to bring a dog. So you could argue that's 50% of my revenue that might not have come, right? You're also charging a pet fee on top of it. So you're making incremental revenue for the same stay. And aside from one situation where I had like a dog, specifically intended for the dog towel, get ruined, I haven't had any issues with it. So I think by and large, the people who are traveling with pets really do know how to take care of them, with the caveat that you always get a bad guest along the way, whether they have a dog or a kid or not. So that's not everybody. The same, I think, is true for like bachelor and bachelorette parties. They get a bad rap. I understand why. I'm not saying that they don't deserve it by any means, but there's big money in that too. And I think short-term rentals are specifically they fit the need for that group much better than a hotel room does. If you have 8 to 12 people wanting to come together to celebrate, you don't really want to buy 4 to 6 hotel rooms and split up and not have a place that you can all gather together. Sure, I guess you could go to the lobby, but then you're with all these strangers. You're not in your PJs. You're not just hanging out. It's great if you can find a great house to rent. And we've had a few, both bachelor and bachelorettes, and we have not, touch wood, had an issue yet. If anything, like I've had people sending me photos from it and being like, this weekend was so amazing. And I think of my own bachelorette party years and years ago. My best friend rented us a house in Montauk. And if the owner probably would have came at like midnight on the second night, it would have looked like a mess. But by the time we left, we had it all cleaned up. It was completely perfect. And now that house is part of a really special memory in my life. I'll never forget that house. And I love the idea of my properties being that for somebody too.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. And those little touches that you talked about. Going back to the team, 'cause I think that was like, there's a few points you brought up that were great. But going back to the team is one thing that stuck with me. That is so interesting because cleaners are the culprit of the organization. For me,
Yeah.
I have in-house cleaning team. I have 40 employees total. A lot of them are cleaners. And I never thought about potentially adding that as like adding not only incentives to like, hey, if there's a 5-star for clean, like we'll give you $50 or something like that. But having them recite the culture of the company and like what you stand for is huge.
Right.
I didn't even think of that. And now that I think about it, you're just getting my head turning and my gears going.
Yeah. Getting people to buy in, right? So that they feel as
Yes.
invested and not just, I have to clean this property for this guy or this girl. It's, oh, this is my property. Like you want them to feel that way so that when they're walking around, like they notice when that one little thing is out of place because they're as invested as we are.
Oh, that's gold. That's gold.
That would be nice.
Any do you do that with your own properties as well? Do you recite a specific value kind of thing, or do you just not?
I don't really do that because, I know these guys are busy and I don't know that is the most effective way. Like they're not my internal team, like your example. So maybe if they were, maybe. But what I do, and actually, I think this was something that Natalie had shared, is like when I get specific feedback from guests talking about how good the cleaning was, I share that with them, right? Because I think people want to feel pride and it also strengthens my relationship with them. I also try to check in on them as individuals. One of my cleaners had her son's birthday party. So I was like, oh, how'd the birthday party go? So it's not just like a transactional relationship. It becomes a bit more of a relationship. Because honestly, if you have a bad cleaning team, like you don't have a business anymore.
Oh yeah. So that's actually a really good transition point. People, right? People are very important, but also hospitality, that's not something you can automate, is to message somebody and have that relationship with them. You can't really automate that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about automation in this industry and where it's headed. I'm sure you saw that in the hotel industry too. As change comes about, how do you keep the human touch to it?
Yeah.
How do you continue to, with early people love having check-ins where they can check touchless, or what is it called? You could check in at any point, contactless check-ins or whatever, where you don't have to go to a desk anymore.
Yeah.
And it's getting more commonplace, especially in the short-term rental world. And we do a really good job of that, and people love that. But at what point do we say, maybe we should add a human element to it?
Yeah.
And the reason that sparks that question is I did have another guest that was doing luxury properties, and she would have somebody hired to show the place around. The property manager would show the place around prior to when the guest checked in. So it would have to be like a guided check-in almost. And so I'm curious your thoughts on that.
It's funny, you've touched on a lot there. First, to talk about the guided check-in. What's so interesting too is like, who wants that? And you could argue everybody wants that. But my husband and I used to have a dog, and he was particularly difficult. He didn't really like a lot of people. Like he had a lot of issues, my dear love. And when we booked places, we were living in the UK at the time, and we would go to the English countryside a lot on weekends. And when we would book places, we would love when they would have keyless check-in without a human around, because we didn't want to have to deal with like our dog potentially acting inappropriately to the host. And also, for the most part, unless you're coming into some sci-fi out of this world house, I know how to work a fridge. I can figure out a record player. I don't necessarily need someone to show me around. So I don't know. I think it comes back to knowing who your guest is and what they want. And I'm not saying that's not valuable, because I think a lot of people do want that. But I don't think everyone needs to leave our conversation and be like, oh gosh, I need to figure out a way to handhold all my guests. The second thing which you talked about was keyless. So interestingly enough, I was on the team at Starwood Hotels and Resorts that launched keyless entry. This was a very long time ago, before anybody had done it. And in typical Starwood fashion, we had a really cool cross-functional team. And then we did a really cool event at one of the W hotels in New York City where we had asked journalists to fill out some information about themselves before arriving, like their favorite movie and favorite candy and whatever it might be. And then they forgot about it. And then they arrived for this event and they were able to just go right up to their room and key in. We were the first ones to launch it. And when they walked in, we had like their favorite movie on the TV and their favorite candy waiting for them. And it was meant just to represent like how personalization could continue to happen in this really tech savvy and digital world. And I think your question around bringing that humanity into it or keeping that humanity into it, actually, this kind of idea of human versus corporate is one of the things that I see as our short-term rental superpowers. And you might think at face value, actually hotels have more humans, right? Like when you arrive there, you have someone at the front desk, you have a concierge, da, da, da. And yes, when you arrive, when you are there, I get it. You typically, depending on the hotel and the segment that you're in, have a lot more people that you can interact with. But actually, when you make a booking at a hotel, you get that form confirmation email, and that's it until you arrive, unless you want to talk to the concierge in advance. And quite frankly, when I've tried to do that, you have to really dig around on a website to even find a concierge email address or call the hotel and find it. And it's not exactly like overt and obvious. Once you're on property, I think hotels do a fantastic job of it. You're even seeing like hotels have WhatsApp so that people can just like text their room service order rather than picking up the phone, because God forbid we pick up a phone. But I think like for us as short-term rental owners, we have that humanness right away. So when I was first setting up my first listing, I thought, okay, I'm going to have my house logo, my little brand logo that I created as my image, which the house is called Trout Landing. So I was going to be Trout Landing with my Trout Landing logo. And before I went live, I thought to myself, actually, no, the house is going to be hosted by me, Katie, and the photo is going to be a picture of me and my husband and our daughter in front of Lake George, which is where the house is. And now I have an ability to interact with you as if I'm Katie, as opposed to if I'm Trout Landing. And so when somebody books with me, where the automation for me comes into it is I already have all my templates ready to go, but I like to look at them before I hit send, because a good example is we have a place in Saratoga Springs, New York, which is home to like the oldest horse racing course in the country. There's a big event that happens there for last year and the next 2 years called the Belmont Stakes. It's part of the Triple Crown with the Kentucky Derby and Preakness. So if someone books for that weekend and my automatic message goes out and says, what brings you all to town? It's a bit like, how are you the expert in this destination? Obviously, I'm coming for the Belmont Stakes, right? So I like to have that final human look over of my message to say, I see that you're traveling with a dog, or I know that you're coming for Belmont, or whatever it may be. And then I can have a dialogue with them as if it's me. So if they say, oh yeah, we're coming to celebrate my dad's birthday, I can say, oh, actually, we just celebrated my dad's birthday here. And let me tell you what we did for him. And maybe that's a good fit for your dad. That's something that a hotel brand couldn't necessarily do. Maybe they could through the concierge, but I think we have a real ability to keep that humanity in it. And I know, like you said, people love automation, and I'm not saying there's definitely not a place for it. There 100% is, but I think we need to keep a bit of humanness in it too.
I love that. And I think this reminds me because you were talking about the automated messaging. Most of us just put automated messaging and just that's it. That's what we do.
Yeah.
But one thing that I did learn from my good friend Bill Faith, and this is one thing he does, and it's funny because I'll go to these conferences and I'll sit through, and not that I know everything, it's the same content kind of gets thrown around,
Yeah.
and I don't usually remember a lot of stuff coming out of conference, but the one thing I did remember coming out of Bill's conference, there's a lot of actionable insights. I'm not saying it was not valuable. The one big takeaway that I had that he does that does better than everybody else is welcome videos. He will personally, not outsource to somebody else, not give a team member to do it. He will personally whip out his phone every time he gets his properties are big properties.
Yeah.
Gets a booking. He whips out his phone. Doesn't matter where the heck he is. He said a lot of times he's at airport. He said airport, airplane, whatever. It was whatever. Takes out his phone. 30 seconds. Hey Sarah, or hey Katie, I see you coming in with your family here to Montana, to Whitefish, Montana. I know you guys are gonna love the lake and the beauty of the serenity of the area. You guys are coming at an incredible time. Let me know if you guys ever need anything during your stay. Like, I'd be happy to help. I'm the owner, and you can contact me directly. Safe travels. Sends it.
Love it.
And that personal touch, that 30 seconds.
Yes.
Guess what? What did we talk about before? 10 minutes, first 10 minutes matters a lot, right? First impressions.
Yep.
First impression, imagine you get something like that. Do you really want to give a bad review to somebody that does that?
Exactly. Right? I thought about this yesterday. So I had this guest yelling at me over Messenger about this pet fee that he claimed he didn't know existed. I'm walking my daughter home from school at the same time. She's screaming from her stroller. Airbnb is calling me, trying to understand what's happening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just like complete overload. And after I got off the phone with Airbnb, I stopped my daughter's stroller and came around and looked at her face to face and was like, what's wrong? And she like instantly stopped. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's like a person I'm yelling at. And I felt like it was such a good metaphor for customer service, because especially, and I think this is harder on the hotel side, people are going to yell at hotels all they want because they think, oh, it's owned by Marriott and they're just rolling in the dough and I can get something from them. If we show that we are just humans here and you're just staying at my house and I'm just doing the best that I can, I want you to have the best experience. Or like Bill, take the time to be like, hey, Patrick, specifically to you. Not only does that tell you like that place is going to be there, but it tells you like if he takes that amount of care with each welcome message, what amount of care does he take with that property you just booked?
Absolutely.
So powerful.
And granted, I don't do that much of a personal touch as well. But I'm a little bit more techie and more delegation. I'm building something, so I'm definitely missing that touch a little bit. But I did deploy something within my team. My team proposed it to call the guests ahead of time to mitigate bad reviews. To call the guests and say, hey, let me know if you have any questions, to put a voice to a name kind of thing. And just leave a voicemail if they don't answer. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So our team's doing that now. That's like a recent development, which is cool. Eventually, maybe AI will get really good and they can AI my face.
AI Patrick will call you.
AI Patrick will do what Bill Fate did. Right. But unfortunately, I don't know if I can do that same level of hospitality.
I think it also comes down to who your guest is. Like the example we were saying about someone meeting you there and showing you around the property. Some guests want that. Some guests don't. Some guests want a phone call. Some don't. Some want a video. Some don't. It's really just meeting them where they're at. And I try to take a lot of my guest communication through the lens of a hotel, right? I'm here. I'm going to send them a message when they first book and let them know I'm here and I can help with recommendations, or I'm here. I exist. I'm here for you. But if they don't respond to me, that's okay, right? Because Marriott wouldn't expect them to respond. Ritz Carlton wouldn't expect them to respond. Ritz Carlton wouldn't say, you didn't tell me why you're coming, so you're no longer welcome to check in. They don't have to. And if I think about my familiarity with booking and using Airbnb versus like my parents' generation, that's also going to be highly different too, right? The fact that place I was telling you about that I stayed in Maine recently that didn't even send me a message about checking in, I could go around and find on the website where those details were, but that was clunky for me. So if it's clunky for me as a fairly tech savvy individual who spends a lot of time on that platform, think of how that could be for an older generation guest too. So I think it just comes down to like us all knowing who we're actually catering to, and then like giving options. Like I can meet you for check-in if you'd like, or if you prefer to tour the property on your own, like that's totally fine as well. I'll call you, but if you don't want to answer, I'll leave you a voicemail. No big deal.
Perfect. I love that. And a question for you, big question I wanted to ask. What's something that you do as a host coming from this big hospitality background
Mm.
and big hotel background with the luxury hotels that you do that no other short-term rental people do
Oh,
or
God.
should be doing more of?
Okay. A few things come to mind, and I wouldn't go as far to say that I am the only one doing it because I think there are
Yeah.
a lot of amazing people in this space. Even if they never worked in hotels, they just get it and they just know
Mm.
what they're looking for. I am like hyper specific on what my beds look like. I like white linens like from hotels. I think white linens subtly say I'm not hiding anything, right? This is clean and I'm not trying to hide anything from you. So I'm very
Love that.
specific about, I spent a lot of time testing out sheets, both for price, durability, all that kind of stuff. So white beds and making sure that looks fantastic.
What kind of sheets do you use?
So shockingly, I found them at Costco.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I don't know if people are going to go, "Oh, that's not so nice," but I think they feel fantastic. I think they're fairly affordable. They're easy to replenish and they just really make a lovely night.
That's funny. I used to use Brooklyn, and then I got this brand called Unique or something like
Uniqlo,
that on,
yeah.
is that what it is? It's
Yeah.
on Amazon. It's so much cheaper, but
Mhm.
like it feels luxury, and everyone loves those sheets.
Yeah.
So we just continue buying them.
And
And I
not to
don't
say
know.
anything bad about Brooklinen because that's a great product as well, but like sometimes you have products that like you're paying for the branding and you don't
Mhm.
necessarily need that. People aren't necessarily, especially with sheets, they're not like looking for a label to qualify the thread count. They're saying like, is this a comfortable night's sleep? Right. So we do the sheets from Costco. They're like a Kirkland 600 thread count, something or other in white. The duvet I found is from IKEA, fantastic duvet. The duvet cover, I believe, is someplace on Amazon. And then the pillows I actually found at Kohl's. They're like Serta brand, but they're like fluffy but firm at the same time. So I don't know. I'm like very obsessive about the bed because I think actually before I worked for Starwood, they launched the Westin Heavenly bed. And that was really the first time that anyone in the hotel industry marketed the bed to their guests. Before that, you had like really horrible, like floral bedspreads and such. And really, that shifted the entire industry to the prevalence towards white linens. And actually, when Starwood got acquired by Marriott International, the CEO at the time, Arnie Sorensen, he came to our headquarters to give a town hall and talk to all of us about what was going to happen. And one of the things he said, he was giving a lot of compliments to Starwood and just saying like how great we were at branding and marketing and how Marriott really watched what we were doing and tried to always beat us at that. And he said, when you guys launched the Westin Heavenly bed, it was such an aha moment for me. Like, we're in the hotel industry. Of course, we should be marketing a night's sleep. How are we not doing that already? So I know the STR community is divided over white or colored linens, but to me, it's like team white linens all the way.
Awesome. The white linens is one thing.
White
Is
linens would
anything
be
else?
one
Yeah.
thing. I would say I like to do a welcome amenity for people. And I know, again, people are mixed on this, but I have a branded tote bag for each of my properties. I think that's
That's
also just like good marketing if people take it home with them. But also, one of my properties, particularly, is close to a lake. So if you wanted to grab some things and toss it in and bring it with you, I think it's helpful. I do a handwritten welcome card for everybody that is on a like branded note card that I've created off of either the logo or like a drawing of each property. And I do a bottle of local wine for people as well. So in Lake George, we work with Adirondack Winery, and in Saratoga with Saratoga Winery. I also like to do like a buy one, get one, almost like coupon. I hate to say the word coupon coming from luxury hospitality, but encouraging people to actually visit the wineries as well and get to experience more about them. I like to do anything I can to spur local business, but I also think the fact that they can get something free out of it shows that I have good relationships with those people as well. So I would say the amenity would be the second thing. And then the third is working in hotels. I have a lot of experience with crisis communications. So you could imagine that like any crisis that happens in a human life has happened in a hotel and will happen in a hotel again. And I probably have worked on like hundreds, if not thousands of cases around the world. And so while touch wood, I've been lucky and haven't had that level of severe issue in any of my properties yet, and I hope I never will. I try to bring that lens of crisis communications to my conversations with my guests. So it's such a small example, but I had one guest staying last summer in our house in Lake George. The house is a chalet that's in 6.5 acres. It's surrounded by woods. It's like very serene and beautiful. And when the guest checked in, the first thing she said, so I'm thinking again, arrival experience, is the house is lovely. I just wanted you to know that there's a bee's nest outside of the kitchen door. It's no big deal. We're going to use the basement door because the basement door is like the main entry door anyway. My daughter's allergic and just wanted you to be aware. And so she was letting me off the hook already. And I think people would say, it's August in the woods. Of course, there's a bee's nest out there. But if I take my kind of crisis hat and say, okay, this is her vacation. She spent a good amount of money to be there. Her daughter's allergic. So not only is the daughter nervous, but as a mama bear, you're nervous when your child is nervous. So instead, I was like, absolutely not. I immediately called exterminators. It was, of course, like a weekend. And this is the rule of crises. They always happen at super inconvenient times where prices are going to be super expensive for you. And my typical exterminator wasn't available. So I had to call around. Anyway, I paid a rush fee. I paid a disgusting amount of money for someone to come and take care of this bee's nest. But to me, it was worth it, right? Because I felt like that would signal to her, I heard her and I take her concerns really seriously. Now, one thing I would say is, I'm not going to lie, part of me expected the pat on the back. Part of me expected her to be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. You did that so quickly. Thank you so much. And that didn't come. And that was a good reminder that we don't do things for thank yous, right? We do things because they're the right things to do, because that is delivering good hospitality. And then, of course, I was lucky to get 5 stars from her. But just because someone's not patting you on the back in the moment doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing it.
Boom. If we could drop mics. Damn. Okay, that's great. Wait, say it one more time. You said it so well. Hold on. That could have been a quote straight out of a freaking book. You said, the great hospitality is not going for the thank yous, something like that. Damn,
I don't even know.
But that
we don't do it for
so
the thank yous, right? We do it for good hospitality. Yeah, we want to take care of our place. It should come from a good place. And yes, that hurt my bottom line for that moment. But overall, I acted in a way that I was proud of. And similarly with this guest that I'm fighting about the pet fee, I'm like, I don't actually really care where this ends up. It's like $100 pet fee. It's not a big deal. Like, it's fine. But I'm really proud of myself with the courtesy and the kindness that I continue to show someone who was being really rude to me. And I will very much make sure that he is blocked and never staying with us again.
And similarly, the person that had a great experience and the hospitality you do, it does help your bottom line because that person might rebook with you.
Right.
At some point.
Right.
So
I think also
100%.
like I probably didn't realize how anything other than 5 stars in our world is like a death knell before I joined, right? And like we had 1 4-star review on our Lake George property. We're probably now up to like, I don't know, 30 or something reviews. Every other one has been 5 stars. And I'm like clawing my way back to 5. And I think I'll have to get 100 in order to get there again. And the reason she gave me 4 stars, her public review was lovely. Her private review was, you didn't have tissues and we needed more garbage bags. Okay. So first of all, I'm like, you didn't tell me either of those things while you were there. I would have either had my cleaner bring them over or I would have Amazoned them to you. Second of all, I don't typically provide tissues because I don't know, aesthetically, I find them very ugly. But again, that's like a me thing and knowing your guests and whatnot. But I think to your point earlier about like taking that radical ownership, I was like, okay, this is something I need to think about now. And maybe this is something that my guests are expecting. And maybe I'll have closed tissue boxes under the sink as opposed to being on display. And I don't know if you're seeing this too, but I think we are at this moment of a really big shift in the industry and about consumer expectations, particularly. There was actually just an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the crazy expectations from guests, particularly to mom and pop STR owners like myself. And I think some of it is fair, right? Some of it is they're paying for something. This isn't they're doing us a favor. They're paying us and we are delivering something. So some of that is fair, but some of that is just old versus new. So my husband's family has been going since his parents were children to this place called York Beach, Maine. It's a very advanced vacation rental market in the sense that that is what happens in that town. You don't have regulation wars or anything because that's just like what has been happening for forever. But you have the way that you book there for a lot of properties is it has to be Saturday to Saturday. I had to physically mail a check. I had to sign a rental agreement, which I know still exists for some of us. You have to pay extra for linens, and then said linens will be folded on your beds when you arrive. And the first thing you get to do when you arrive after you paid a lot of money is make your bed. It's almost okay in that market because that is what people expect. But I think, oh my gosh, if that's a market that I want to go into, how easy is it going to be to stand out when you just do some of the things that you and I are talking about as like commonplace?
Wow. That'd be so cool. You should probably try.
Maybe it's in the works.
But it is in the works. No, okay. So I think let's wrap this up here. I do want to get into the last few questions here. First thing, what does the future hold for Katie?
First and foremost, Sweet Success, my lovely little podcast. That has been such a labor of love. You would understand it better than anyone, but getting to talk to people about a topic that I love so much and feeling like I walk away from every conversation going, how can I think about that? How can I apply that to my world? That has been so fun. Big shout out if anyone wants to come over and have a listen. I would very much appreciate that. And secondly, I would say I have been fully bitten by the STR bug. I love it. I love this little world of ours. And
you're an addict.
I am an addict. There's a joke about like tattoos. When you get one, you need another. That's how I feel about STR properties. So I'm definitely have some markets that I have my eyes on once my bank accounts refill a little bit.
Facts. No, I feel that. So what is an educational resource that helped you get to where you are today? Could be anything.
That's such a good question. I would say the value of podcasts like yours, like Natalie's No Vacancy, like STR Sisterhood and Slick Talk. As somebody who joined this world knowing nothing, that was super, super helpful. So just like listening to you guys and have these conversations and think, oh, I should be sending out a message 2 days before a guest arrive. And oh, there is automation, and oh, Price Labs exists. And what is that? I think that was really helpful for me because I had stayed at short-term rentals before, and obviously I'd worked in the hotel industry. But when it comes to actually setting up your own, you have a lot to learn, and it's fun and it's great. And I'm just grateful for podcasts like yours that help you along that journey.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then last but not least, how can people find you if they wanted to reach out and follow up on the conversation?
Yeah, that would be great. The podcast is Sweet Success Podcast, also sweetsuccesspodcast.com. That's sweet like hotel suite. And on Instagram, I'm at by Katie Cline. So BY Katie with a K and Cline with a C like Patsy, CLINE.
Awesome. Thank you so much for dropping bombs and just keeping it real. And I think this was a great discussion. It was awesome. So Katie, thank you for hopping on and sharing your world with us.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Patrick Real Estate Show. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a follow and leave us a 5-star review. Your support truly means a lot. And connect with Patrick in the show notes below. Until next time.